Hey, welcome to this edition of Maz's Musings. I'm really excited to share this episode with you. It's something a little bit different than what we've done so far. I'm talking with Matt Conway, an entertainment writer with Reminder Publishing, who's really become pretty well known for his movie reviews. We talk a little bit about movies that he's been excited about that he's seen so far, some of the movies he's excited about seeing when they come out in the near future, and we also talk about some of the recent Disney products and some of the struggles and opportunities that the company has faced as it tries to navigate the next chapter of its movie-making journey. Matt's a great guy with some really great insight, and I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. So here we go. All right, I'm here with Matt Conway, who, on top of a lot of other things, is an entertainment writer for Reminder Publishing. He's formerly a staff writer with us, and we loved his insight on entertainment, especially movies, so much that we kept him on even after he moved on. So, Matt, if you wanted to take this opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to people and talk a little bit about your experience, then now's the time.
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm the voice behind the pen, who's writing the D&E columns that you'll see in the Reminder Weekly. I've been covering movies for it's almost a decade at this point, maybe even a little longer. I did it when I was a teen, running my own little blog, and it wasn't really going anywhere, but eventually I, got some feature spots on some good sites and was able to build enough of a rapport with, press people and et cetera, that I was able to do some pretty cool stuff. I got to go to some film festivals. I have my name on a poster. The movie isn't that great, but hey, it's cool to have my name next to James Franco's face. And for me, I've just always enjoyed covering movies because it's such a great platform to kind of showcase different perspectives in the world. I think the thing I've always enjoyed most is feeling someone's distinct kind of voice and imprint on a movie and having that articulated in a artistic medium that's unlike any other. I mean, books are engaging in their own way, music is engaging in its own way, but movies kind of combines all of these different senses into one, and it can be just such a powerful kind of experience, not only just to witness, but also if there's kind of substance boiling under the surface, then it can really reflect some meaningful sentiments about the world, about how we all connect, etc. So I've always really enjoyed going to the movies. I've been very lucky to have family who supported that hobby throughout the years, and now I go pretty much, I'd say, at least 2 times a week. So it's become a habitual kind of part of me for much of my life.
Now, one thing that I'm always interested in is the approach. When you are going into a movie, especially a movie that you know that you're probably going to review, is there a rubric, or are there things that you go in that you're looking for, that you're kind of, for lack of a better term, grading the film on, or is it much more of just kind of a feel thing?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. For me, I would say initially, I think as a teenager kind of growing into movies, it was more of that kind of Rubik experience of, analyzing the metrics of how good are these performances, how good is the direction. But as I've gotten older, I've grown to just love, feeling out a movie. And I really go into everything with a completely open mind. I mean, I'll see something like Madame Web and give it a thumbs up. I am happy to be surprised. I'm happy to be taken on a journey. And I think the kind of sensibilities I've grown to really be attached to are the type of filmmakers who really evoke a sense of atmosphere and mood, and letting that kind of permutate in kind of evolve in fascinating ways throughout the runtime.
Now, you're mentioning directors that evoke a certain mood. Are there certain ones that you've found to be favorites?
Oh, there's so many to count. I could go on for hours, but my personal favorite has always been Steven Soderbergh, mainly because he is so incredibly versatile. I mean, he could do a daring kind of heist Vegas style picture like the Ocean's trilogy. He could do a drug trafficking crime thriller like Traffic. He could make a horror movie like Contagion or Unsane. Like he really could just hit so many different beats. And he's always been someone who's been willing to embrace kind of the evolution of film. He's one of the only directors to shoot a big screen movie on an iPhone, which he isn't just like kind of a tacky gimmick. It actually enhanced the movie and created a sense of claustrophobia that was really interesting. So he's definitely one. I love Barry Jenkins, the director of Moonlight, and If Beale Street Could Talk. I think the way he can capture, human emotion and just these really challenging dynamics through poetic visuals, it always just, captures my attention. And then I mean, I can't not mention Scorsese. I feel like his influence can be felt in like 90% of filmmakers today. He was able to, conjure such kineticism in everything he makes. It's always so evocative and bold and daring. And like I said, everyone's kind of, taking notes from the influence he's had over like 4+ decades. And he's still going. I mean, he's in his 80s and he's still rocking great movies out. So those are some that come to mind at least.
Now, you mentioned that you're someone who goes to the movies regularly, maybe twice a week. I'll readily admit that I'm someone who normally goes to the movies twice a year. And that's largely because I just haven't been able to find the time. So a lot of times I'll have long lists of movies that I've heard about or that people have recommended to me that I never get to see. You know, a lot of times it's even just once my daughter's put to bed and we're sitting there, we're just like, I'm not sure I really want to invest 3 hours in something right now. I might be asleep in an hour and a half. But with all that said, you know, for someone like me who may only have the opportunity to see one movie in the next, few months, is there anything that you have seen recently that you would say is you got to go see this, or you've got to, find it on whatever streaming service it's on now?
That's a great question. Now I'm gonna make two picks because I think one of them kind of curtails towards a certain demographic, and I could see other people not being as enthused by it. So the first one is Dune. For anyone out there who loves kind of high concept science fiction, really deep and intricate world building. This movie is an experience. It really took me back to seeing like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where it's like I haven't witnessed a movie that felt so epic in scale and the sense of grandeur and just everything about it on a technical level is insane. I saw it in XD, which is kind of like I'd call it like IMAX Junior almost. It's a similar experience, but not quite. And my seats were literally shaking at certain points just with the audio and the visuals. And I love that kind of experience sometimes when a movie could just be almost like a roller coaster where you're just like, oh my gosh, you're hanging on for dear life and you're really feeling the tension of each scene. But I also liked the movie a lot because I do think it captures a lot of the interesting thematic angles of the material where, the protagonist Paul Atreides is, hailed as a messiah of sorts and kind of falling into the egoism of that and just kind of breaking apart the mythos in some really interesting ways. And it ends up, making a few really impactful character moments. So that's definitely one that stands out to me as really good. The other one, I would say this is an action movie, but also kind of comedy, mystery, and also wasn't a huge favorite of a lot of people's, but I liked Argyle a lot. Matthew Vaughn, the director, he did Kingsman, and the X-Men First Class, a few other flicks. He brings a lot of unique style to it, and it's a very fast-paced, almost Roger Moore-esque James Bond kind of campy and colorful spy espionage thriller that kind of globe trots over all these ridiculous places, and the action is insane. There are some scenes, I'll just say this, a character ice skates on oil while having swords fights with people. So it goes into this like deep imagination that you're almost like dropping your jaw looking at. But I think there's really some inspired craftsmanship to it. And I really like the performances. You got Bryce Dallas Howard, Henry Cavill. it was a fun kind of old school spy caper. So those are two that have stood out. But I will say the first few months of the year is usually like the dead spot. That's when like studios are taking out the trash almost.
Was something that that you documented in the reminder recently, if I recall. So.
Yes. Yeah, the January doldrums. That's what I always call it.
So you obviously know that I'm a big Disney fan. So I have to ask the question. Have you seen Wish?
Oh,
And what
good
did you
question.
think?
I didn't have a chance to see it yet, but is it on Disney Plus yet?
I don't believe it is yet. I think it is coming out later this month, but
I
don't quote me on that.
hmm I will say I didn't see that, but I did see both Turning Red and Soul on the re-releases because I am a diehard Pixar fan for the most part, and it was so great finally getting a chance to see those in the theaters. But what did you think of Wish?
I have not seen Wish. That's why I was I was throwing it to you, hoping that you had. But so bringing it to more the larger picture with Disney, and not just Disney. It seems like they're having some growing pains with where they're going to go with other franchises, like the Marvel franchise, and to a certain extent Star Wars as well, whether it's at the box office or critically. It seems like a lot of what Disney has been producing lately has been falling flat with audiences. Some blame bad marketing, for some of the box office issues. Some blame, the, for lack of a better term, going quote unquote woke. What do you see as some of the problems that Disney has encountered in at this stage of their movie making lives at this point?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is a lack of innovation. If you are to chart Disney's kind of peaks and valleys, the peaks have always been when they've been willing to take a risk that, okay, this might not pay off, and then it works beautifully. Like, I think of so many of the Pixar movies as this kind of high wire act of, okay, you're trying to entertain all audiences while kind of weaving in a more thoughtful message. And when it all comes together, it's this magical experience. But I've seen noticed now that I think Disney is kind of, placating to what people have liked and trying to deliver more of that same experience without growing upon it. And I think Marvel is a great example for it because you had Endgame as this pinnacle moment that, so many people loved and appreciated, and they just kind of were like, all right, here's more superheroes. And it's like, well, they're not quite Iron Man and Captain America, but they're also kind of doing the same stuff. So it didn't differentiate itself, and it still lived in the shadow of its predecessor. So when you kind of just try to deliver more of the same, I think people get sick of it. And the other thing I'll say too is, making a movie, it's this kind of like, almost a jazz improv, it's so many things coming together, and it really is the creativity of it. When you try to make movies and like, the studio kind of mindset of, oh, we need to hit this beat, have this in it, and it's kind of like a formula, then it kind of falls apart because it's lacking that kind of heart behind it. But what have you felt of some of the recent Disney movies?
So, you listed Soul as one that you got to see at the re-release. That was one that I did see, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that was something that did do something. I felt a little bit different. I'm trying to think back to some of the more recent ones that I've seen. Can you help me out with some titles because I'm not good at coming off this with this off the top of my
Yeah, we
head?
got last year we had Little Mermaid, the remake came out. We had Elementals came out. I liked Elementals a lot.
So I really liked Elemental. I thought that Elemental so it was an animated movie that was not made for kids. Kids can watch it, but it was not meant for kids. That movie had a message for that message was one that was meant to resonate with adults, with and especially with certain populations who grew up with certain in certain cultures and in certain ways of how different cultures interacted, and still do to a certain to an extent now. So I think that that was something that was designed to speak to an older audience, and I thought that it did it effectively. I also enjoyed The Little Mermaid. I thought that some of the performances were good. I didn't necessarily need any of the additional songs. And I visually it was outstanding. That was one of those ones that I was like I need to see this in the theaters. So overall, some of those were things that I enjoyed. I can't say that there's been anything lately that I've seen that I've been particularly blown away by, you know.
Mhm.
And I mean, I will readily admit my own nostalgia. I basically I was an early teen in a lot of the sort of, second golden age when like The Lion King and Aladdin and all of that was, so I've set a pretty high bar for my expectation. And, lately what I've seen has been, even when it's been entertaining, it's like, yeah, yeah, it's entertaining. That was pretty good. There hasn't been much since I want to say like the last thing that I was really like, wow, I really, really enjoyed that was probably Zootopia. Like something that I was just like, wow, that was a really great movie. And there have been plenty of things, especially like Pixar things that I've really obviously Toy Story, we did not need Toy Story 4, but that's a whole other
Yeah.
thing. I think The Incredibles is like one of the best movies that was put out in that time frame. So yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, there are a lot of times where I feel that some of it is uninspired and pretty yeah, pretty formulaic. So I would agree that's something that they've struggled with finding, what that, I don't want to say the negative because it would be wrong. The formula for what's going to work moving forward, I think that they've struggled to find that next great idea.
Yeah, 100%. I like that you said you grew up in like the second golden age of Disney because me personally, I was extremely lucky to grow up, I think, in the golden age of Pixar when you
Hmm.
have Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, Wall-E, Up, Ratatouille, Toy Story 3. It was like every one of these movies was, great to fantastic to an all-time classic. Like they just didn't miss. And I guess now, I growing up with that kind of standard does make it tough for everything else to live up to it because those were just movies crafted by the apex of talents. I mean, so many of those directors like Brad Bird and Pete Docter have gone on to do so many great things. But I definitely can relate to that experience.
So is this just something that kind of ebbs and flows? Is this something that you'll see with other studios or other companies as well? Or is this just, because there was the time where there was the high, you had some of these great movies and then it kind of fell off and you had you know Atlantis and things like that didn't quite, hit the same notes and didn't resonate with people the same way. And then obviously Pixar, which, was an acquisition on top of everything else. But there's another wave that they were able to ride. So is that just the way these things go, where you kind of get complacent until something else comes along? Is this something that is a pattern with others, or is this a Disney problem?
I think you're right in saying it's kind of this ebb and flow, and I think a lot of it is dictated by who's steering the ship. I mean, the last Disney president, I forget his name. I mean, talk about a short tenure. It kind of came and went, and I don't think anyone was that happy with the decisions he made. And some of those decisions you're kind of seeing play out on the big screen with recent movies, less so than Bob Iger, who took over like last year, the fairly recently or retook over, I should say. But I think film is interesting because there's always these ebbs of flows and different interest points. I mean, if you look at the 60s and 70s, spaghetti westerns were all the rage. And now if you spent more than $20 million on a western, it's probably going to tank. And now, the 2010s, you saw superhero movies were soaring to these meteoric heights, and now they're for the most part kind of floundering at the box office. So I think audiences' interests kind of change, and I think it's up to studios like Disney to catch on with that. I think a great example too is like what we've seen with other animation studios. I mean, Sony and DreamWorks with Spider-Verse and the second Puss in Boots movie, The Last Wish, the inclusion of kind of adding this 2D, sensibility within the 3D animation was really invigorating and unlocked kind of interesting textures and this fascinating kind of collage of colors and styles. And when Disney is just kind of doing the same 3D look, people are getting kind of bored of it. So I think a lot of it, like kind of I touched on it earlier, is being willing to embrace innovation and try things, and eventually it'll catch on.
So it's funny you bring up the tying in 2D elements and things like that because something just came into my head in terms of like something that I saw from Disney that I actually really, really enjoyed. And I think it was like it was a straight to Disney Plus thing. And it was the Chippendales Rescue Rangers movie.
Yes.
I mean, I thought that that was great. It was original, it was fresh, and it tied in a lot of different elements that I thought worked really well together.
That was one of those movies I like watching it. I was like almost shocked. Like, how did this get made? How did Disney fund this? Like, it felt so like completely, ubiquitous and different than anything else Disney would make. But man, trusting Andy Samberg and Akiva Schaffer and those guys to really imprint their kind of quirky, you know, pop culture referential kind of sensibility within the material, I think drew something really interesting and kind of self-reflexive, looking inward at kind of the state of, animation and family films and how a lot of it is kind of running through these retreads. And so I really liked how I thought it was extremely clever. There isn't a lot of family films, I think, that are able to really look inward like that and kind of reckon with its own existence in a way.
Yeah. Well, one thing, obviously I've got a 6-year-old daughter on top of everything else, so I've really, really come to appreciate animation again, and that's a lot of the movies that I've watched. And one thing that it's not a Disney product, but one thing otherwise that I've seen, I think it was on Netflix, and this was a few years ago. It might have come out during the pandemic or just before, was The Mitchells versus the Machines. Have you seen that?
I love that movie too, and that's from Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the same duo that helped produce Spider-Verse. And that was a really great movie, and I think just like Spider-Verse, there's a real buoyancy to it and vibrancy, but also, the story, it's somewhat predictable, but I felt like there was real heart within that,
Hmm.
within the kind of the relationship between the daughter and the father and having that kind of disconnect of interest, but eventually growing to understand each other. Um, that movie was a lot of fun. I think that was one of my favorite pandemic movies because that's when you were just kind of waiting desperately for something to watch. It's like,
Oh,
oh my gosh, I can't go to the theater. I'm losing
yeah.
my mind here.
People were so thirsty for entertainment they were drinking the sand. I mean, they were binging Tiger King, and so I mean it was a dry time, but that was an oasis, so to speak. Yeah, I enjoyed, like, there was a certain ridiculousness to it, but there was also, like you mentioned, the relationship with the dad and the daughter, so there was a certain familiarity, so that actually blended really well together. The whole thing with with the machines not being able to tell whether it was a dog or a loaf of bread. I mean, just something like that is just, it's just ridiculous enough that that it's hilarious, but also it's just like, yeah, that dog, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think that I'm just waiting for that next rebirth of Disney animation, and I just keep waiting for it. So just kind of, putting a bow on that whole conversation.
Yeah.
Um, something this is kind of I guess Disney and Star Wars adjacent. This is a movie that I actually saw on a plane, and I'm wondering if you saw it. I don't remember if you had written about this or not. But Gareth Edwards, the creator.
Yes, 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 yes. I did enjoy that movie.
I really love that movie. I mean, granted, I was watching it on my phone on a plane, so I've probably also, on top of everything else, lost something, in the translation there in terms of visually and everything like that. But I thought that that was a really well done movie, and you've mentioned before tying in messages and topics that resonate with people, and obviously there's the AI element to that, but I think that that can also, that topic of AI can also translate to other aspects of life and culture. So I thought that it was pretty effective.
Yeah, I really like that movie. Another thing I really felt through it is kind of the similarities to kind of early 2000s zeitgeist of, in a state of fear and terror. It's almost this militaristic approach to control things, and you have these ominous drones floating through the skies, and kind of this Patriot Act-esque kind of breach in privacy and stuff like that. So I thought visually the movie was able to evoke some great ideas, and there was just certain scenes that were so stellar. I mean, the when they were going out to their first mission and you had that Radiohead song hit, I was just like, oh my God. It was perfect. Perfect, it was one of those perfect movie moments where it's the visuals, the sound, the emotion of the moment all kind of blended together. But yeah, I really liked that, and it was great to see. I saw that I think two or three times in the theater because I'm a sucker for sci-fi, but especially if it's an original story. I mean, especially movies on that scale really just don't get made anymore. So it was a great experience.
Now that was one that I don't think did very well, at the box office. What do you attribute that to? Because I mean, the movie itself I thought was tremendous.
Yeah, I think with science fiction, if it's an original thing, it is such a risk because for every Avatar, you have 10 movies like The Creator or The Host, or you can go down the line, or the Reminiscence with Hugh Jackman a few years ago that people just look at and think, this looks a little too stiff or a little too, high concept for my liking. So I do understand that science fiction is very niche, but it's definitely a niche that I will devour. It's definitely one of my favorite genres. So it was disappointing. It didn't do great here in the States. I do think it did better internationally, but I definitely hope Gareth Edwards gets another chance to make a blockbuster type movies because that and Rogue One showed he can really do something interesting on that kind of scale.
Absolutely. So, keeping in mind that this podcast is probably going to drop not this Friday, but next Friday, what are one or two things that you're looking forward to that you have seen on the horizon? You're just, oh, I've got to run to the theater to see that.
Oh, that is a great question. And I feel like now the movie year is starting to heat up in a way that you're kind of getting those interesting releases. Now, one of them, it's a movie that I don't even think looks great, but I'm just so fascinated by it, and it looks so like kind of campy and over the top that I'm, just entranced by it. And that's the Civil War, the movie directed by Alex Garland, which is such an obvious kind of meditation on, societal disconnect and the very rigid kind of political lines. It looks so like kind of self-serious that it's almost like a farce, but I think it'll be fascinating to see a director really, not even subtly just lean into kind of the sentiments of the time in a kind of a big and campy action movie. So that I'm at least interested in, and it's a fascinating kind of seesaw of it could see it being really good or completely terrible. This summer we have some really good movies coming out. New Planet of the Apes, the last trilogy with Andy Serkis was really fantastic and brought a really humanistic lens to these characters. So I'm excited for that. Furiosa, the new Mad Max movie, what George Miller did with Mad Max Fury Road, it still sticks with me today. It was such a full throttle, thrilling blockbuster experience, that had you on your edge of your seat and so vivid and it's kind of weird, kind of quirky world. And I'm very excited to see what comes from that. And yeah, I'm trying to think. I know the movie year is kind of interesting where the beginning is slow and then you have the blockbusters and then at the end you have all the award hopeful kind of more dramatic movies. So they were kind of stepping into the time we're gonna get a lot more of those kind of big, bold kind of blockbuster experiences. But is there anything coming out that you're looking forward to?
I haven't had much time to really look into it, so I can't even answer my own question. And like I said, I've got a list of movies a mile long that I haven't seen yet. I haven't seen the latest Guardians of the Galaxy yet. So, just to give you an idea on how far behind I am on stuff. And then on top of everything else, you've got series that have been coming out that I'm trying to keep up with. I've been on the third season of Bad Batch, so I'm keeping up with that, and so you know, I only can do so much. I have enjoyed some of the Marvel spin-off series. Especially if you're not taking them too seriously. They're some of them are just kind of fun. I really enjoyed Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I did just finish watching Echo, which I thought was good. The last couple episodes of that I felt felt a little rushed, like they could have used another couple of episodes to, I don't want to say draw it out, but there were parts that I was just like, I wish that I'd gotten a little bit more. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I
sorry,
do
go
want to
ahead.
ask you one last question.
hmm
If you're a big Star Wars guy, if Disney went to Chris Mazza and said, Chris, dream us up our next Star Wars movie, knowing the vast lore that you know, knowing all these expansive stories, what would you say? What would you say the move would be?
On the spot? Oh man, you know, honestly, I leave the creative stuff to other people, and then I just complain about it later. No, I'm just kidding. I honestly don't complain that much either, because a lot of the stuff it's just meant to be fun, and like people forget about that a lot, especially with Star Wars. Like the culture is so toxic in a lot of ways, because people it doesn't happen the way they want it to happen, or they think it should happen. I I know that it gets crapped on, and maybe it's not the most well executed thing in the world, but yeah, I'll still watch the sequel trilogy because it's fun. I mean, yes, there was ridiculousness in the original trilogy too. The Return of the Jedi has Ewoks. They make zero sense, but they're fun. So
Yeah.
leave the Ewoks alone. So I can't say that I can like how I'd want it to go. I'm more just along for the ride. I try to just enjoy things as they come. So,
Yeah. Well, I hope to see you May 3rd, the Phantom Menace re-release in theaters. I mean,
oh
everyone's
God.
favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah, I try to accept those at this point, as they are, accept and appreciate what they were, especially for, the time that they came out. So
Yeah.
I think the one that I have the hardest time with is Attack of the Clones, and that's mostly because of how heavy they leaned into the CGI. That there's a feel to Star Wars that I feel like the sequel trilogy kind of got back to like it almost feels tangible, and that was one movie that just didn't.
Yeah.
Um,
Couldn't agree
so
more.
so we're running out of time here, but one thing that I did want to ask, and you've got about 1 minute to answer it, is I was going to ask you kind of a similar question. Looking back at all of the Disney Pixar catalog, if they were to say to you, what should the next live action reimagining be? What would you go with?
It's funny because they're kind of making it, but I would do something completely different than what they're doing now. Tron. Get Jared Leto out of there. All right. Let's get a real movie star in there. Let's get Joseph Krasinski, the director who did Tron Legacy and Top Gun Maverick, back in the director's chair. Let's get Daft Punk back to do the score. Let's rock it. I love Tron, so a good Tron movie would make my heart very happy.
All right. Well, hey, Matt, thanks for taking some time with me. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
folks, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Admittedly, as someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with movies and certainly none reviewing movies, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from this conversation, honestly. But I thought that Matt gave us some really great insight, and if you haven't read his stuff with the Reminder Publishing, I really encourage you to do so. He provides a really approachable and sensible way to look at movies and the way that they're made. Every time that I talk with him about this kind of stuff, I learn something new. And I hope you guys learn something and take something away from this episode. As always, thank you for listening. And as always, I'd encourage you to check out Reminder Publishing's podcast, So That Reminds Me, which has a new episode dropping this week as well. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to shoot me a message at mazasmusings@gmail.com or on X, formerly known as Twitter, at mazasmusings. Once again, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, give us a follow, write us a review, rate us, and tell your friends. And most of all, have a great week.